Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1145 of the Juicebox Podcast. Erika Forsyth is back today. Erika and I are going to kind of button up the parenting series with an episode about transitioning care. So we're talking about going from you being the one making all the decisions to handing that off to your child. While you're listening today, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you're interested in learning more about Erika, she's at erikaforsyth.com. How would you like to help people living with type 1 diabetes and maybe help yourself? t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Fill out the survey completely, become part of the registry, and just like that, you've helped. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Now they're looking for U.S. residents who have type 1 diabetes or are the caregivers of someone with type 1. They're looking for everybody, but have a real focus right now on men of color, and of course, parents of boys. If you fit the bill, which is pretty much everybody, please reach out, t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Completing the survey helps type 1 diabetes research, it helps the podcast, and it will help you one day too. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. It takes about 10 minutes and they won't ask you one thing you don't know the answer to. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the insulin pump that my daughter wears, Omnipod. Learn more and get started today with the Omnipod DASH or the Omnipod 5 at my link, omnipod.com/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by AG1. Drink ag1.com/juicebox. When you use my link and place your first order, you're going to get a welcome kit, a year's supply of vitamin D, and 5 free travel packs. This is the transition of care handoff episode for the parenting series, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think this is going to be the last one, or do you think we're going to add anything else to this?
I think we could probably add more as we think of more ideas or we hear feedback.
Okay.
For some more ideas.
Let's do that then. Let's call this the last one for now.
Yes. That sounds good.
I get stuck too many times making series, and I come out and I make these definitive, like, this is the last one. And then like 3 weeks later, I'm like, here's another one. I apologize. I didn't realize. So anyway, what would you like to talk about today, Erika?
Well, we're going to continue our conversation we started in our last episode, overcoming parenting challenges. And we thought it would be significant enough to have this episode focus on the transition of care, kind of the handoff, so to speak, and talk through some ideas and tips and suggestions.
So are you telling me that in your mind, transition of care, that handoff is a parenting challenge, but it's so meaty that we couldn't give it a little bit of space in that other one? It needed an entire episode of its own?
That's what I'm saying, Scott.
All
That's
right.
good.
Okay. Well, I agree. So let's get going. You want to read through your ideas, or do you want me to ask you questions? How would you like to do it today?
Well, I thought as I was thinking about this episode, I had the vision of a relay race of 4 runners, but thinking about the first runner to the second runner handing off the baton. And in this analogy, it works in some ways, it doesn't work in other ways. There is a start line diagnosis. The finish line, we don't have a finish line yet, but I think in this analogy, maybe thinking about is the finish line everyone, both parent and child, feeling confident, competent in the management.
Yeah.
And in this, when you think about if you've watched a relay race, there is a period of time in which the runner can hand the baton off to the next runner. There's there's markers, yes. And also this analogy doesn't really work because there are no rules, right, around when that line in real life should be passed on to your child. But let's just pretend in this scenario, every runner and every team does it differently. Like once they pass that first marker line, a runner might hand the baton off immediately to the second runner. Some runners will hold the baton a little bit longer between the first and second runner. And then some hand it off right before that last kind of marker where you can pass the baton off.
Yep.
And so I think it's important to hold that kind of image as we talk about this, because every family is different when they are handing that baton off. Every personality of the child and the parent is going to be different, different comfort levels. But we all families will go through this transition time.
Yeah. Do you think that, generally speaking, parents want to do this? Or do you think it's a thing that they eventually realize that they have to do? Or I guess maybe there are a lot of different personality types. In my heart, I've seen my wife not want it to end. Like, she doesn't want this leg of the race to be done. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I am in the middle. I'm upset and saddened by it when there's a passing of the baton. But at the same time, I see the bigger picture. Not that my wife doesn't see the bigger picture. I think it's just emotionally harder for her. But I wonder if there are some people who just don't want that separation. And if there are some people who want it too soon. And I hate to talk like that, but I do sometimes see people that seem like they didn't really jive with parenting. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I think I've seen and heard and read all different types of their parents are, as you're saying, maybe wanting it too soon, but maybe that's because the child is really demonstrating independence. But I also hear a lot of parents talk about the guilt. Like, if your child is diagnosed younger, you are managing it as the caregiver, but then some parents feel guilty that they know eventually it will need to be passed on to their child. So I think it really comes with, as we talk about it, so many different layers of emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it runs that gamut from, basically saying, you're old enough, do it yourself, which I've heard said at ages that it seems too young to me. And then there are some people, like you said, who are just, they are really helicoptering and they're not letting go. And where does that happen? So it's much more about, it's the balance, right? It's the balance of your comfort and their ability. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I think the caveat here that makes this difficult is the expectation for outcome. So if you, I don't know how I can explain this, then I'm going to get out of your way and let you talk.
No, you're good.
But what I see happen so often with people with type 1, especially for parents, for kids, is that they don't know all the time the successes that they could be having, right? They might get started with a doctor who tells them, oh, your 8 is a great A1C. And then they get stuck there and they don't think of it, or they cling to that. If it goes to 300 and comes back down, it's fine. Like that kind of stuff. Now, suddenly that kind of management is what they think is normal. And they're not putting that much effort into it because nobody's given them any tools. And they figure the kid can do this. All you got to do is count these cards up, push the buttons. They get high, they come down, they get low. They drink a juice if they're low. That's the end of it. They're not actually focused on quality health, probably because nobody's told them how to accomplish it. So I bring this up because I've had so many conversations with people in their mid-20s, later 20s on up that will tell me stories about like, oh, I was 13, so I was old enough. And, or I was 18 when I was diagnosed, so I was an adult. I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's a lot for a younger person to do. And the parents sometimes unknowingly even are just like, well, here, you're doing a good job at it. You're pushing the button when you're supposed to. And they don't even look at the outcome. And then that kid's off on the wrong path. Anyway, I've seen a lot of that. That's what always pops in my mind first when we talk about transition.
How the management starts has an effect on the transition,
a lot of
obviously. Yeah. And I think it's also important to note too, when you are newly diagnosed, I know we're talking about transition of care. I think one of the things I was going to mention later on, but I can say it now, is that a 12-year-old who's diagnosed as a 12-year-old may act and look and function very differently in their management versus a 12-year-old who was diagnosed at age 2 and might be just thriving and managing independently because they've got 10 years under their belt.
Yeah, they've got more time in the simulator, right?
Yes.
They know what they're doing.
Yes. And in the beginning, yes, you might go out of the gates with, either not the right education or not really knowing, having the tools, and you're overwhelmed with all of the things and the grief and the processing. but there's also still hope for the parent to learn. And remembering as the parent who is then, as you're transitioning the care, that you had a period of time of grieving, of learning.
Mm-hmm.
And as you hand that off to your child, they might be going through that too, even if you're like 10 years into it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it doesn't matter maybe if you're at this for a long time, you've still been there helping or maybe doing all of it or most of it. Now suddenly you're giving it to them. It's a new burden for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, to expect that they might have an emotional response to it, even if you feel like they are ready.
Sure. Oh no, and they could be ready and still have that response. 100%. Yeah, no, for sure. Wow. This is a lot, honestly. So Go ahead, let's go through what you have here in our notes and we'll pick through a little bit. In 2015, I needed support to start making this podcast, and Omnipod was there. They bought my first ad. In a year, when the entire podcast got as many downloads as it probably got today, Omnipod was there to support the show, and they have been every year for 9 seasons. I want to thank them very much, and I want to ask you to check them out at omnipod.com/juicebox. There you'll find out all about Omnipod 5 and Omnipod DASH. You'll figure out why a tubeless insulin pump is probably right for you, and there are links to get started. Everything's right there at omnipod.com/juicebox. My daughter has been wearing an Omnipod tubeless insulin pump since she was 4 years old, and she's about to turn 20. It has been a friend to us, and I believe it would be a friend to you. omnipod.com/juicebox. And of course, taking care of your health isn't always easy, but it should at least be simple. That's why for the last 3 years, I've been drinking AG1 every day. No exceptions. It's just 1 scoop mixed in water once a day, every day. And it makes me feel energized and focused. That's because each serving of AG1 delivers my daily dose of vitamins, minerals, pre- and probiotics, and more. It's a powerful, healthy habit that's also powerfully simple. Before I was taking AG1, I would get that brain fog in the middle of the day, and I just couldn't seem to get on top of it. But now, that doesn't happen anymore. By starting my day with AG1, I found focus and a renewed ability to perform at my highest level all day long. Drink AG1.com/juicebox. When you use that link, you're supporting the production of the Juicebox Podcast. I drink AG1 in the morning, but you could use it as a coffee replacement, before a workout, or in your smoothie. If there's one product I had to recommend to elevate your health, it's AG1. And that's why I've partnered with them for so long. So if you want to take ownership of your health, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase exclusively at drinkag1.com/juicebox. That's drinkag1.com/juicebox. Check it out.
Okay. Yes. Emphasizing, just like your parenting style, just like we've talked about attachment, we've talked about so many different things, that it's really important as you're entering this stage of wondering, should my child be taking on more? Is my child ready? Am I ready? To focus in on your family. I think it's really easy, particularly, when you're online comparing. And so seeing your peers, your caregiver peers, you yourself as a type 1, looking around saying, well, gosh, my friend can do it. Why can't I? Or as a caregiver, wow, that kid is doing it. So just being really in tune with every family is different, and that's okay. And there's no hard and fast rule about when this should all happen. I mean, I think there are certain, when you think about like milestones of your child, like when should they learn how to brush their teeth on their own?
Mm-hmm.
When should they learn how to dress? Like there are some normal developmental milestones that your child should be hitting. This one, we often think about like teenage years, getting ready for, into high school, going off to college is usually about the time. But again, your 8-year-old might be managing perfectly. So
there's little things that I've done along the way. Arden's 19 now, she's almost 20, but the littlest things, like I talk out loud when I'm doing diabetes stuff with a younger person.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you're about to eat now. That plate looks like, well, you know what? I think the roll's 25, and let's not forget there's some protein in that burger. So let's just throw in a couple more there. And then these fries, and there's fat in the fries. So you're going to get higher later. So I'm going to put this in here. And then a little later, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to do a square wave bolus or an extended bolus, whatever you call it. Something like that. I'm going to tell the algorithm, whatever your management style is. So she hears it over and over and over again. Arden counts carbs exactly like I do. We have never spoken about it directly. Like, we look at a plate, she's always a couple carbs heavier than I am even. And so we're right in line. But that's just because I just would voice it. I wouldn't tell her, here, watch how I'm doing this. It was never instructional. It was just happening in front of her so that she'd pick it up as time went on. Same thing with filling stuff and changing things. I would just talk her through it. Like, oh, we're going to take this off now because this is peeling on the corner. And so that one day she'll see it peeling on the corner and she'll think, oh, that shouldn't do that. Like, I just think that's the way to go. But as to the age, I guess I'll save till the end how I did it. But it's tough to put a parent in charge of a decision like that, because like you said, you are knowingly giving the kid something to do for the rest of their life. I've had that thought on my own, like, oh, when I pass the baton completely, it's on her. Like, I'm done almost, and that feels terrible. Like, I don't want that for her. It's different than go pay your rent or buy your own damn cell phone like that, like something like that. It's much different than that. And it can stop you. But I also know that there are some parenting styles that will allow that to completely slow down the process, if not grind it to a halt. And there are some parenting styles that'll say, like, I'll throw them out of the nest here and see if they can fly. I always said to my wife when she's defending our kids too much, I always go, are you their attorney?
Oh, I bet she really likes that.
She's thrilled with that one. Yeah. And so, she loves it when I say that. But there are times where I'm like, you're defending them. You're not thinking about them. And that's, I don't know. Anyway, keep going. I'm sorry.
Yes. It's the question is, when, I think it's what we're trying to kind of define, but you can't really define it. When does this transition happen?
Yeah.
And I think it's partially, maybe starting with age and stage and comfort of management. But also, I think if you're like waiting for this moment of like, oh, okay, I think my kid can do it now, that there might not be this, aha moment. And so starting slowly, like you were demonstrating, verbalizing what you're doing, they might be asking, some kids and a lot of, teens I work with, they want more of that independence and freedom, really, and autonomy with their life in general, because that's their developmental stage. And then they want that in their diabetes. So as you're hearing your child ask and or kind of wondering, maybe they should start to have more independence in their management, checking in. Okay, why am I resisting this as a caregiver? Am I fearful of relinquishing control? Is there grief in that process? Like you said, there's like a sadness. And that's all really normal to say, oh, this is really hard. I need to grieve this.
I also think it's possible that grief comes out in different ways. It's not as easy as they look sad. It could be rebellion in little ways, like just not doing it, forgetting, putting it off, yelling about it a little bit. I'm just going over the things that I've seen from Arden over the years.
Yes.
I think you would listen to this podcast and think, oh, this is amazing. That guy's daughter's got an A1C in the high fives. And I think right now it might be, I think it's 5.9 right now. And it's not a lot of effort and, they know what they're doing, et cetera. But that's hard fought. Like, getting to that point took a lot of time. And it wasn't because Arden was like this simple kid who just loved it. Like, she's been on a couple of times. So I think people recognize that she's not that kid who's like, oh my God, daddy, diabetes, I'll do it. That's not where she came from. Like, and I know you're talking about that specific like style of, I don't know, the way kids' brains work maybe, but I've also heard from adults who will say, I was precocious as a child and I was like, let me have it. And they're like, I didn't really know what I was doing. But as soon as I said, let me have it, my mom disconnected. That gets said to me a lot. Like, they just shut off. And I've also heard from people who asked for the control from their parents, but not because they thought they were ready for it, but because they did not want to be involved with their parents about it.
Yes.
And that's a hard, I mean, as you're sitting and listening to this is a hard pill to swallow. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Imagine, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, what if my kid was like, I do not want to be involved with you.
Mm-hmm.
So
they want to cut off completely and do their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that would include, can mom or dad follow me on the follow?
oh, that's a non-starter for me.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants help going to college is getting followed on their Dexcom. There's a simple rule for me. That's how I get paid back. What happens though, Erika, when the kid wants the autonomy, but they don't really want to do it. They just want to shut you out. I mean, you grew up with diabetes in a different time, right? You forged some diabetes logs in your day.
I did. I sure did. Yes.
So what happens when they say, I got it, but on the other side, the A1C is up and up and up?
I think that's going back to, okay, if your child is saying, I want to manage this, I want to be more independent. I think if you have that parent-child relationship to say, okay, we are going to do this on a trial period. You have to earn it. Like you have to earn the right to stay out later for curfew. Mm-hmm. You have to earn the right to drive or whatever other, stipulations you have to earn that trust. You have to give them the opportunity to earn it, and then they have to prove it and continue that cycle.
I find some of the hardest blending here comes because what we're talking about, it's not apples to apples. And you say like, hey, listen, if you want to drive, you have to take the safety course first, right?
Right.
But because diabetes is a safety issue, it's a safety issue, it's a health issue, but then it's also a personal issue and it's an autonomy issue. And it's things you're not even thinking about, which we've covered in some episodes. But, what's the most outlandish example I can think of? Oh, if your child's young right now and has type 1 diabetes, you're not thinking about the day that their blood sugar goes up when they're masturbating and you come knocking on their door and they're like, get away from me. Like that is going to happen. Like that. There are so many like human things that are going on with all of us, but now you're monitoring them. I don't think any human in history of humans has felt good being monitored. And so, right, it's not a human trait to just go, oh, yeah, sure, subjugate me. Because that's what it's going to feel like, though, as they start getting older and older. So, man, what the hell do you do?
I noted that, like, it's such an interesting thought around being a teen now, being followed. Multiple people know your blood sugar at all times. Mm-hmm. Some people use LiveScan 360 or Live 360.
You know where you are.
Right. You know where you are as a parent. You know where your child is all the time. You're being constantly monitored. That raises anxiety levels, I imagine, most of the time for one or the other.
Do you think people are really stalking their kids? I know I can find my kids' phones, but I don't. I did once when Cole moved away the first time for his job. Oh my God. I once, on his first day of work, he was driving through Atlanta to go to work, and I knew he was leaving, and it got in my head, I wonder if he's on time. And I opened up my phone, and I could see that he was driving, and then I got very melancholy and watched him drive. I watched the little stupid icon drive the entire route through Atlanta. All right, I'm sorry. Oh, God, I hope he never hears that.
But did he make it on time?
I don't remember that part. I just remember thinking like if the car keeps moving, he's alive, like is how it felt. You know what I mean? And so, and I don't know why I thought like, he's a great driver. He was 23. Anyway, but do you think some people are always looking? I guess they are, right? And then the kid knows that because people say shit like, I saw you went here, and you're like, oh, look at my phone. And then you're feeling judged about every decision you make that impacts your blood sugar. Got it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And while all of this data and technology increases, safety and hopefully reduces long-term complications and the risks of lows. I'm talking about the follow, but also even the follow, Find My and Live 360. Those are all great things, but I think as caregivers, that just will raise anxiety. And as a teen, I think having these types of conversations to have an understanding of like, okay, if you are going to follow my app, and if that is a non-negotiable, if you're going to follow me on the Dex or whatever other CGM, can we not talk about it constantly? Right.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, we're kind of going back and forth here, but as like if the child is wanting that independence and you're saying, okay, let's do a trial period. Okay. So but I'm still going to follow you. Then maybe the freedom in that 24-hour period is you aren't saying, okay, you're rising 50 points, correct, or you're going low. I mean, obviously maybe you have an emergency. If you're going this such and such number arrow down, we're going to do something, but everything else,
you kind of have to let go a little bit.
Just let go.
Yeah. So I've learned to do that over the years, where if Arden's blood sugar gets above where I think it should be, where I know, like I'm looking at it, I'm like, we could fix this in 2 seconds. But she's in class and she's not thinking about it right now. Like, what's the last thing in the world she wants? Is a text from me that says, hey, would you bump your blood sugar down a little bit? I do save it for moments when I think it's a big deal. You know, safety moments are one thing, but I also think of high blood sugars as safety as well. Yes. You know, if a couple of hours go by and she's I don't want people laughing at me. If she's like 150 or 160, like for a couple of hours, Erica's like, "Oh my god,
yes."
So, but I'll say to her, "Hey, like, you know, is that algorithm suggesting any insulin? Because give it, you know." And we've come to a place. It's okay now. Like I don't say it too much, and she accepts it when I say it. Like it's the I think I've demonstrated the value of my words by having an economy of them, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think before going back to the initial stages of your child is wanting to be independent. And I think going back to your question of, is your child wanting to be independent because they don't want to be in a relationship with you? I mean, I think that can happen for a lot of teenagers for a season. Mm-hmm. Or are they wanting to take care of their diabetes by themselves because they feel like they can? I honestly don't know if that really matters in the beginning because they're wanting that independence.
Yeah.
And to say, okay, here are the boundaries. Let's give it a try for 6 hours, 20, whatever hour amount that you both agree on. And then have that, okay, when can I, as a parent, suggest here, you know, we have the safety boundaries or safety protocols, and what are you comfortable with? And maybe for 24 hours, you guys agree to do nothing. I don't know. It depends on what you want. I think it's important to listen to your teen in those initial requests. Mm-hmm. I'm saying teen, but it could be younger.
Anybody, yeah.
Yeah.
Arden and I have a shorthand where if she just ignores something completely or she really screws the pooch somehow, then all of our niceties go out the window. And she's accepting of that too. Like I will sometimes be like, you know, so I'll see that her schedule has her in class all night, right? And I can see her pump has 15 units left in it. And I look and I go, she's going to try to get out, go through class and come out of class without changing the pump. She's going to want to do it afterwards, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll say maybe, hey, listen, I think you might save yourself a lot of trouble here by changing your pump in the afternoon. And then she doesn't do it. And then the night comes along and I'm now seeing, you know, there's a unit left in the pump. I'm like, hey, now's the time we're going to go change the pump. Like no more, I'm going to try to make it. I'm going to do like, it's over now. Like you're not going to be without insulin, like now. And then she'll go, oh, all right, I'll do it. Or like the other day I sent her a text and I said, I need you to change your insulin sensitivity by 1 point, make it 1 point weaker overnight because you're getting these little lows overnight. And I think this is going to fix it. I mean, she's using IAPS right now. And I just wanted to just adjust it the tiniest bit. So the next night when I was woken up in the middle of the night and had to text her, I was like, she didn't make that change. But I didn't say anything then because it was 3:00 in the morning and that would have been ridiculous. And I waited until the next night, which was last night. And we were actually sitting and talking about something else. She was showing me something she was working on. And at the end I said, hey, how did it go changing your insulin sensitivity the other day? And she goes, it went great. And then she smiled. And I went, you didn't do it, right? She goes, I did not. And I was like, okay. I said, well, can you do it now for me, please? She goes, well, I'm just getting ready to jump out. I'm going over to this lab and I'm going to do some drawing with somebody. And I was like, that's great. Change your insulin sensitivity. I was like, because it was like late night, Friday night. And I was like, your thing's going to switch at 11 p.m. And then I'm going to be up at 3 a.m. if you don't make this change. And she's like, oh, okay. I'll do it. And I went, no, do it now. And she goes, no, I can't. I'm rushing out. Send me a text. And I went, come on, Arden. And she goes, if you text me, I'll do it. I was like, okay. So I sent her a text. Now, we'll wait another night and see what happens. And then I'll ask her if she did it again. And that might, to a lot of people, be like, oh my God, that's so much. Like, just turn the dial, kid. But that's me trying to do what you're talking about. Let her be her own person, not force things. She's not like, her blood sugar's not 20 overnight. Like, it's like dipping under 70, and I'm like trying to make a little adjustment to it. I honestly think that most of what we're talking about is alleviated or at least made much easier if you go to the Pro Tip series and learn how to use insulin. I know that sounds like me trying to get people to listen to the podcast, but I 100% think that if you are making decisions that are ending the way you expect, then it's a lot easier to say to the kid, like, hey, go ahead, give it a shot. I know that, 1 + 1 = 2. Like, we're good. I think that a lot of the concern comes when people don't know what they're doing. And they're like, oh, I don't know what, the kid's high all the time. They're low all the time. They, that kind of stuff it's scary and dangerous. And isn't that the place where you have to put your foot down no matter what?
If they're high.
If we're like just ignoring things, like, if a day turns into a week, turns into a month, turns into a year, and the next thing you know, you look up and the kid's A1C is 10 and they're going, I can do it. They can't. Right. So what do you do there?
I know that happens. That situation is out there. And I know it's so heartbreaking and painful. And so, as a caregiver, you experience such a sense of, powerlessness and also really grief because your child is demanding, you've given, and they're 20 and don't know how to manage. I would then attribute that to a bigger issue, right? Is that now your child as an adult or whatever age, obviously having an emotional response, a lot of feeling with the diabetes. It's not, and I would also look at, how are they functioning in other areas of their life? Are they thriving in every area and they just don't really know how to manage their diabetes, or are they really struggling across the board? I would be looking at, is there a lot of maybe depression, anger, trauma around having the diabetes that maybe hasn't really been properly addressed?
Yeah.
And so it just feels easier in the moment to ignore it.
I think my quandary is I'm a tough love person, like generally speaking, but if tough love means you're gonna like lose your eyesight when you're 35, then what do I do? Like, do you know what I mean? Like sink or swim comes to mind, but it's not like I said, go to college and you said, I want to work at McDonald's. And I was like, sink or swim. Like, you know what I mean? Like you'll have a job. You'll be working at McDonald's and you'll probably, those jobs pay pretty great at this point. You're probably doing fantastic. But this is a different thing. Like in my mind, if you don't, I'll have to say this, the harder decisions that I've made about transitioning Arden's diabetes over the years have always been fueled in the back of my head by the idea that I really only have like till she's 22 to get it accomplished, right? Like I can hold on 18, 19, 20, like, like, hey, I'm paying for college, like pay attention. Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. But after that, she's gone. Whatever I gave her and whatever she decides to do is the only thing she's going to do. I mean, I've seen adults who are parents of children with diabetes and their kids have gotten older and their kids cut them off from knowing about their blood sugars. And it's heart-wrenching to them because they assume that they're not okay, because if they were okay, they would tell me they were. So they're not. That's why we're not talking about it. And then you worry for the rest of your life. Erika, I don't want to worry for the rest of my life. I just have a couple more years left. I just want to relax. It's a bigger problem. It's very much unlike all of the other parenting issues that come up with children. And it's why you see so much hand wringing about it online. And isn't it fascinating how it hits people right away? Like if their kids are 2 years old, they're already worried about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thinking, yes, about the independence, about their next stages of life, adulthood, children. Yeah, I know it's easy and painful to go there. And, you mentioned worry. Are you going to worry the rest of your life? And, I haven't personally launched my own children, but I think as going through those stages myself, I think there's a sense of knowing that your parents trust you. They've done what they've could and they are launching you. And that's that. And it's hard.
I think for the great many of us, this is what's going to happen. And it's going to be okay. I really do believe that. I genuinely think for most people, it's going to be okay. But there are plenty of people listening right now that are like, look, my kid is a mess, and they have diabetes and they show no interest in it whatsoever. And I don't see how that's going to change. Those people are it almost makes you feel like they have a child that they're never going to completely be able to separate from.
Yes. And I know that that can happen. And there's often, this sense of, is it too late to help my teen child, adult child take responsibility?
Yeah.
And, I don't want to say sometimes maybe it is at some point too late. And then as adults, they are going to have to figure out how to accept, grieve, accept, manage independently. And I don't know, there isn't like an exact time frame, but I know that can happen. Yeah. And that's a really, really challenging place to be as a parent.
Through a lot of our conversations, I'm always struck by the kind of core idea that it seems like it's impossible to make somebody care about something they don't care about.
Yes.
It just really seems like there's no amount of teaching or trying or showing that can just change someone off of something that they don't find important. It's one of those like human things that eats like inside of my chest. I think about it all the time. Like, because of kind of what I do for a living, honestly. Like there are plenty of people who will say things to me like, I don't learn well by listening. And I'm like, so what? I'm like, you're telling me that like, it's hard for you to listen to a podcast. I understand that. Some people don't learn well by listening, but you're also saying on the other hand, my A1C is 9 and I'm really in trouble and I want to do something. And I've heard that you have this thing that helps people. And I go, yeah, listen to these 25 episodes. I think you'll be okay. Oh, I have trouble listening to things. Well, okay. And then I try another way to explain to them, like, well, I have transcripts. It's a lot of reading. I'm like, okay. And it's the same way with kids. Like you can tell them something 1,000 times. And if it's not something that they jive with, it's not something they jive with. But then it's this thing. And then what's coming next is really coming. You're not going to avoid it. That's for sure. You can't wish it away. You can't put your head down. And at the same time, as I'm being a bummer, I really do want to say, I think for the grand majority of you, it's probably going to be okay. If someone came into your office and had a kid who just like was a wall, didn't care, wasn't doing anything, would you think that something like that eyelet pump would be a good midway point? Like, hey, look, this pump just, it's only going to keep your A1C in the 7s, but all you have to do is tell it it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, small, medium, or big. That would be a good idea in that situation, don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If, obviously if that child is open to having the pump on them, but I think that would be a wonderful alternative than either, not injecting or not, giving the carbs or whatever it is. I think that's a really nice option for people to really minimize or just reduce the amount of decision-making and action you have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's I haven't read a ton, but I know hearing more and more people start to use the pump, the eyelet pump.
I mean, an eyelet pump they're saying in the 7s. I'm saying if you're going to ignore your diabetes, you're going to be in the 9s, the 10s, the 11s, the 12s, the 13s. Like, I mean, just take the 7 and don't know what you're doing. Like, there's got to be a point. I'm not saying the eyelet's a give up, but in a situation like that, stop thinking you're going to get down in the 6s or the 5s and just go with healthy and, and happy too. At some point, it's not your life to live, obviously. It's a hard thing to say, right? It's not your life to live. But the thing that I would always be concerned about is a child's decision-making process being impacted by these lower, higher, or vacillating blood sugars. Like maybe you're not really talking to all of them. Do you know what I mean? If their blood sugars are bouncing all over the place too.
And yes, like how can they be in a grounded place to say, okay, yes, I'm ready to take it on, or I don't want to take it on, if they aren't feeling good physically and emotionally.
Erika, is it fair to say that having a really high blood sugar for a long time can make you feel foggy?
Yes.
Right. Is it akin maybe to being up for like 20 hours straight, being exhausted, but trying to keep going or something like that? Like, is that when you'd ask your kid about a thing? Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
But if their blood sugars are high all day and you're like, you got to take care of this on your own, you're not getting the full capacity of their brain back, you know, and even bouncing blood sugars. I don't know if everybody realizes that, going low and high and low and high over and over again. We have a whole episode about it. I think it's called Altered Mind, about how vacillating lower or higher blood sugars change your ability to think and perceive things. So
100%.
Yeah.
And it's super fatiguing. You feel very lethargic.
I guess my point is that I really do think if you understand diabetes even a little bit and you've got some stability, most of your kids, like Erika's been saying through this whole thing, there's going to be a certain time for them and you'll see it, right? You'll hold that baton out and you'll feel when it's time to let go. And and just make sure you're not the one who's screwing up the transfer, right? Right.
or holding on too tight if they're ready.
Yeah, because then it falls on the ground, everybody kicks it, and then somebody falls in those little shorts, and it's very painful.
Yes, and I think in that, if you are fearful of letting go as the parent, you know, and you truly feel like you have, you know, you're confident in the management, your child is learning and understanding it, but you just can't quite let go. And that happens, right? Because you're fearful and you want to protect your child. And does this feel like you're not protecting your child by letting go of the baton? I think going back to basic reality checking of, okay, we have the app, he knows how to correct, he has his snacks, all the people know around him, like really doing the basic reality checking of, because the fear is, you know, I don't want my kid to go low and have a seizure and die. And I don't want him to have long-term complications, right? Those are, I mean,
that's what we're talking about.
When we're boiling it down, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
And so really, and having to remind yourself, write it down, pin it up on your mirror. But if it's when it's the child who's not wanting to hold on or wanting to rip it out of your hand, I think just going back to these are logistics, these are management styles and tools. And I think having the understanding, knowing how to do it is really significant and important in this process, but also reminding yourself there's so many emotions involved. And is it a matter of acceptance? Has your child not truly accepted it? Yeah, that's okay. Give him the skills, the tools, the support to do that, in addition to the logistical management.
Right. And I'll just say, if you happen to be a person who is just disconnected from this, and, you know, I don't think anybody would probably admit this out loud, but if in the back of your head, you're thinking, I can't wait for this to be over and for this to get off of me and be on somebody else, at least do them the favor of teaching them how to take care of themselves well before you do that. And I even understand that. I'm not judging anybody, but, you know, if it's too much for you as the parent, offloading it and hoping they figure it out. I mean, you couldn't figure it out, right? So what are the odds? Take them somewhere, a doctor, let them listen to the podcast, like do something, like try to get them to a better place. Don't just set them out on their own and say, I don't know, walk west, you'll find it, you know, because that's it's not going to work out. This conversation has reminded me that Arden has been back at college for a week now. And I have to send her the text that says, please refill your vitamins. And if you haven't been taking your vitamins, please start taking your vitamins. I only asked her to take like 2. And I'm like, just take these 2 vitamins. She's like, I will. But the last time she came home with her little vitamin thing, and she's unpacking, and we were helping her unpack. And I was like, this is how I left it when I left it with you last time. And she's like, oh yeah, I didn't take those. And I was like, oh, Arden. like, come on. So, and she's 20 and easy to get along with. So, you know, 19, 20 years old, she's easy to get along with. And those vitamins sit right next to her bed. They're staring at her. Yes. I think it's an act of will. I think it's probably more work not to take the vitamins. than it would be to just take them. But I do wonder if sometimes if that's not a little bit of trying to find control in something. Don't you think?
Having control, or just feeling maybe also loaded down with everything else, and just like I can't open the container and pop the pills because it just is one more thing.
I'm gonna cut something away.
Gonna choose. But yeah, having that sense of like power, control of what I can and can't do, and that's normal. And and maybe if that's the one thing she's choosing not to do, maybe that's okay. But I know you want her to take. You're like, no, she needs to take the vitamin. I just
want her vitamin D to be high enough. That's all. Vitamin D, a little bit of magnesium oxide. That's all I'm looking for. Not a ton of things. I'll tell you right now what you're making me think of. If you have sent one of those kids off into the world that's not doing a good job for themselves, and they're partnered up with somebody, I don't know that that's a terrible way to attack this, which is maybe go to the partner and say, hey, look, this is none of my business. They're going to be definitely pissed if they know I came to you about this. But there's some certain things they're supposed to be doing. And, you know, if you can find a way to learn about it a little bit and just just look over their shoulder once in a while and see if this is happening, you're going to be helping them. I know that's probably not a good thing to bring up, like psychologically, but it popped in my head because the only thing that I've ever seen change a person is the desire to do it for somebody else or some other thing. That's the only thing that I have consistently seen work in humans, right? I'll do it. I won't do it for me. I'll do it for an unborn baby. I'll do it for the idea that we're going to get pregnant. I will do it because I looked over at my kid one day and realized, oh, hell, that kid needs me to pay for stuff for the next 20 years. I'll bring my A1C down. Like, that's the only time I see it. I talk to so many adult type 1s. I just started using a pump last year. I'm like, why just last year? Oh, you know, my daughter was diagnosed. She got on a pump and she didn't want to get on it. So I did it too. So she would be. And I'm like, and how's it going for you? Oh, I should have done it years ago. Great. You know, like, so those are two things I know for sure about people. It's you can't make somebody do something they don't want to do. And the only thing I've seen change people's minds is the desire to do something for another person. Love is actually the thing that I would say if I had to narrow it down to one thing.
Yes, change is hard, and finding the motivation to change is even harder. And maybe it is just that sense of love for somebody else to make the changes for yourself, to be there for them. Yeah, it is tough.
Existentially, does that mean that I don't love myself enough to do it? Is that what Freud would say?
Yes, but yes.
Yes. But is that true of everybody? Like, do people, is my daughter not taking her vitamins because she doesn't love herself enough? No. Yeah. No. So, yeah.
I think it would be hard. I wouldn't make that like as a tried and true statement. I think there's so many layers to why am I not taking care of myself or my diabetes? Is it because I don't love myself? Or maybe it's just because I hate the diabetes, but I love everything else about myself.
You're punishing the thing and not the... It's interesting. It's all very interesting. Anyway, did we cover everything? You put a nice note in here about something that I've said in the past and we never got to it. So
about the college?
Yeah. No, about the laying breadcrumbs. I must have said that in front of you one time and you loved it enough to write it down.
You did.
Yeah. Is it just because I said I leave breadcrumbs for Arden to find?
Yes.
Yeah. Like ideas of, you know, I say things out loud and I'm like, ooh, if she follows that along, I'll drop another one later and try to keep her going. But yeah, your point about college, we didn't get to it though.
Let's just say it's not an ideal situation and your child is wanting the independence. They're going off to college. They're still figuring out how to manage, to have maybe one non-negotiable around the management piece, that their roommate, the floor resident RA person, anyone else that's kind of in a consistent circle of your child, that they know that your child has type 1, they know where the glucagon is for emergency, right? Because your child can do everything independently except for if they're unconscious.
Right.
I think that's a really important non-negotiable this is like for the child who's leaving, obviously, the house for college. Even that might be challenging, right? To get to an understanding, an agreement to. But the hope is that, you know, you want your child to live and survive.
Arden was very amenable to that 2 of her 3 roommates follow her on Dexcom. They only have the 55 alarm set. So the urgent alarm is the only alarm that's set. Arden does not reach 55 with any, reasonable, on any reasonable schedule. So that's there as an emergency. And have we talked about the glucagon fire drills they do?
No.
Oh, I must have talked about it in another episode.
Oh my gosh.
So they do fire drills where they make Arden pretend to be having a seizure, and then they run around and get her Gvoke HypoPen and stuff like that. And they go through the steps of everything before they do it. They are laughing about it while they're doing it, to be clear.
Right.
Yeah. These 4 girls, that was it. So Arden's like, and that was the girls' idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one day the girls came in and like, we need to tell us this again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is this? Because we talked about it. Like the first, try to imagine the first day they moved into college, we took all the girls out to dinner and we were like, look, it's a couple things about Arden she needs to explain to you. And, here's can you imagine you're 18? You're probably like, oh, what? I'm just trying to get drunk. This girl might what? And so we explained it all to them. They were very nice about it. And then Arden said a couple of weeks later, one of them came in and said, we should practice with this. And then they were laughing and they were like, lay down and shake and we'll do the rest. And so they actually, now they do that for fun sometimes, but turned into a plaything. But I've also talked to people whose kids are in college who are like, I'm not telling anybody about this. And I agree with you. One person needs to understand this. Mm-hmm. That's it. And also I need to know how to call your roommates. That was a thing we did. So I have Arden's roommates are in my phone. And, it's happened, I guess, twice now. Once where I actually couldn't wake her up and she was pretty low. And one of the girls went and got her and gave her juice and she was fine. And there was once where I moved a little too quickly and then I heard about it the next day.
Oh, you reached out to the roommate?
Yeah, and I heard about it from Arden. She's like, that was not necessary. And I was like, you ought to try being 700 miles away when your blood sugar is 52 with an arrow down, because it felt necessary to me and you didn't answer your phone. She's like, I was handling it. I was like, you didn't answer the text. So they got the call. Mm-hmm. And, now she's better about it. She's more responsive now. And I think, again, maybe to protect her friends more than herself.
Maybe. Maybe.
So,
yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Oh,
anyway.
Yes.
Good luck, everybody. Good job.
It makes me wonder, how did I survive college? I don't know.
Well, were you thinking about your mom when you were talking about this? Because your mom raised 2 kids with type 1, right? Mm-hmm. So I wonder what she did.
We did not have
any of this.
Dexcom. We did not have find anything.
Find anything.
Yeah. I don't know.
That find your iPhone is my best tip for people who have iPhones. If your kids don't respond, you can send a find your iPhone signal that is piercing on the other side.
I've heard that.
Yeah,
yes.
I've done that a couple of times over the years. Did we miss anything? Or are we good?
No, I think, as we always hear the cliche from upon diagnosis and then in this transitional period, it is trial and error. But I think we often, when we hear that, we still think we should nail it and have no mistakes, no growth pains, but it is trial and error. So expect errors.
Yeah.
And I know that there's maybe that's not the right term, but in this phrase, expect that there's going to be painful bumps. Your child is not going to get it perfectly all the time, just like you didn't as the caregiver learning initially.
You absolutely have to step back and see big picture on this one. This is a slow transition, really slow. Erika, you might imagine that throughout the years of me doing this, one of the most aggressive questions I've gotten from adult type 1s who listen to me talk about this are like, yeah, sure, but then your daughter doesn't know how to do this. And I'm like, no, she's learning slowly. And then I would tell them the same story over and over again. I was like, you send your kids off to school on day 1 and they come home and they don't know how to add. Mm-hmm. There's no day where a bell goes off and they know how to add. It just get to the end of the year and they're like, hey, 2 and 2 is 4. And you're like, oh, it happened along the way somewhere. Right. So you just keep having those experiences, you're calling them trial and error, but they're experiences. Mm-hmm. They go one way or the other. You learn from them eventually and you move on. It's why I tell people not to beat themselves up. I would say never spend the time beating yourself up about a decision when you could spend that same time learning from it.
Mm-hmm.
That just makes sense to me. We already went through it. We already screwed it up. Let's figure out what we did so we don't do it again. Like, instead of, I don't know, seriously, like whipping ourselves in the background here about it. Like, let's just look at it, see what it was, keep moving. A lot of it's keep moving. And then one day you just look up and, it works and you don't even know how the hell you got there. So that's life, basically.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
I just fixed your whole life for you. Keep going. Keep trying. It'll be fine. And if it's not, I don't know what to tell you. You lost the lottery. I don't know.
Be kind to yourself. Yeah, be kind to yourself.
Well, see, Erika still has good advice at the end of it. If it doesn't go your way, be kind to yourself. It's I'll finish by saying that when Arden was diagnosed, I almost immediately had the thought that this is not the life I thought I was going to live. Somebody just shifted me drastically out of the lane I was in into another lane. And it takes you a long while before you realize there is nothing you can do to get out of this lane. Diabetes is here now. That's it. It's not going anywhere. My kid's got type 1 diabetes. This is where I live. You can be happy in that lane and fulfilled. And more than that, like, you can do everything you were going to do in the other lane. You can do in this one too. You just have diabetes and this stuff comes along with it. It doesn't change the rest of it at all unless you let it. And I don't usually talk like that, but I do think that's true. Like, if you can get good management ideas, learn the tools, use them reasonably well, with the exception of some bumps once in a while, you're going to live the same life you thought you were going to. But it just doesn't feel like it when it first happens, is all.
Yes. And I think you even said in our previous episode, no one delivers a child and expects them to be diagnosed with something or have a hardship.
Yeah.
And so there is that, from the lane that you had envisioned for your child to moving over to the lane that you envisioned with your child with diabetes. That takes time. That can be painful.
Yeah.
To switch lanes.
Everybody gets something.
But I appreciated that. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you remembering that. Everybody gets something. Like, I see a lot of perfectly healthy kids on TikTok flipping over railings and landing on pools 2 stories down. And I think, oh, not a health concern in the world. Just stupid. How about that? So just because your kid doesn't have diabetes, because you can look at that sometimes. You can look at other people in the world and say, yeah, they're so lucky. They don't know, but you don't know either, right? Like, they might have something else going on, or just, I don't know. I just think everybody gets something. That's sort of how it seems to me. Yes.
But you don't live with that necessarily, that expectation.
No.
Maybe, but you're right.
Oh, no. I really thought I was going to be 6'3", weigh about 180 pounds, have a perpetual tan, be very handsome. Everything I wanted.
That's right.
Thought money would fall out of the sky on me, stuff like that. Yeah, none of that's happened. I appreciate you doing this with me very much.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
I'll see you next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye. If you're living with type 1 diabetes and you think therapy might be right for you, Erika Forsyth may be able to help. Check her out at erikaforsyth.com. I'd like to thank AG1 for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast and remind you that with your first order, you're going to get a free welcome kit, 5 free travel packs, and a year's supply of vitamin D. That's at ag1.com/juicebox. If you'd like to wear the same insulin pump that Arden does, all you have to do is go to omnipod.com/juicebox. That's it. Head over now and get started today, and you'll be wearing the same tubeless insulin pump that Arden has been wearing since she was 4 years old. The After Dark series from the Juicebox Podcast is the only place to hear the stories that no one else talks about. From smoking weed to drinking with type 1, perspectives from both male and females about having sex with diabetes. We talk about depression, self-harm, eating disorders, mental illness, heroin addiction, use of psychedelics, living with bipolar, being a child of divorce, and honestly, so much more. I can't list them all. But you can by going to juiceboxpodcast.com, going to the top, and clicking on After Dark. There you'll see episode 807, called One Thing After Another, episode 825, California Sober. Other After Dark episodes include Unsupported, Survivor's Guilt, Space Musician, Dead Frogs. These titles will make you say, what is this about? And then when you listen, you'll think, that was crazy. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Find the After Dark series. It's fantastic. When you support the Juicebox Podcast by clicking on the advertisers' links, you are helping to keep the show free and plentiful. I am certainly not asking you to buy something that you don't want, but if you're going to buy something or use a device from one of the advertisers, getting your purchases set up through my links is incredibly helpful. So if you have the desire or the need, please consider using Juicebox Podcast links to make your purchases. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, the Bold Beginnings series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to begin listening. In this series, Jenny Smith and I will go over the questions most often asked at the beginning of type 1. Jenny is a certified diabetes care and education specialist who is also a registered and licensed dietitian, and Jenny has had type 1 diabetes for 35 years. My name is Scott Benner, and I am the father of a child who has type 1 diabetes. Our daughter Arden was diagnosed in 2006 at the age of 2. I believe that at the core of diabetes management, understanding how insulin works and how food and other variables impact your system is of the utmost importance. The Bold Beginnings series will lead you down the path of understanding. The series is made up of 24 episodes, and it begins at episode 698 in your podcast or audio player. I'll list those episodes at the end of this. To listen, you can go to juiceboxpodcast.com, go up to the menu at the top, and choose Bold Beginnings, or go into any audio app like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and then find the episodes that correspond with the series. Those lists again are at Juicebox Podcast up in the menu, or if you're in the private Facebook group, in the featured tab. The private Facebook group has over 40,000 members. There are conversations happening right now and 24 hours a day that you would be incredibly interested in. So don't wait. Check out the Bold Beginnings series today and get started on your journey. Episode 698 defines the Bold Beginnings series. 702, honeymooning. 706, adult diagnosis. 711 and 712 go over diabetes terminologies. In episode 715, we talk about fear of insulin. In 719, the 15-15 rule. Episode 723, long-acting insulin. 727, target range. 731, food choices. 735, pre-bolus. 739, carbs. 743, stacking. 747, flexibility. In episode 751, we discuss school. In episode 755, exercise. 759, guilt, fears, hope, and expectations. In episode 763 of the Bold Beginnings series, we talk about community. 772, journaling. 776, technology and medical supplies. Episode 780, treating low blood glucose. Episode 784, dealing with insurance. 788, talking to your family. And episode 805, illness and ketone management. Check it out. It will change your life. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.